investing in people in the long term, there has to be a mutual understanding.
Hustle hard. Close mouths don't get fed. Thinking strategically, but acting like a gorilla is the kind of marketing that's small for the planet. Innovate very little. It's highly risk averse. And it takes
the first time if you move into a house, let's just say either your house that you moved into, congratulations, it's got a yard, which means you have to do yard work, which means you have to mow the grass, or it's your parents' house. And your parents, because they maybe give you money or give you food, you have to mow their lawn in some kind of way. So the first time you go about your business of mowing the lawn and getting the gas and starting up the lawnmower and getting the right stuff laid out and traversing around the trees, and the first few times you cut the grass, it's going to take you 2 hours. But the 50th time you cut the grass, it's the same grass, same tools, but it's going to take you half amount of time because you got it down. You know how to do it. You cut the grass 50 times. It doesn't take you very long to think through, how am I going to go about doing this? That is the concept of economies of scale as well. You just become better at doing it. There's learning advantages. There's efficiencies that are created by doing it over and over again that allow you to save cost, save time. Time is a big cost. So thank you, Neil, for pointing that out. Once you globalize something and you do it at scale, even though you're a premium differentiated product, you can still do it in a fashion that delivers possibly less cost to your operation. And obviously there's a lot that goes into economies of scale. You also have more bargaining power with suppliers. You also have possibly cheaper labor because you have access to labor that is in different countries. Economies of scale is doing something over and over again, and then it becoming easier to do and becomes less costly, but you can do it of the same quality. Same quality, less cost. It's essentially what economies of scale produces. Make sense? Cool. All right, so let's get into this portion of it. Where are we in this class? Well, we're in the point now where we're finally beginning to formulate a strategy, believe it or not. In the first chapter, we just talked about the general idea of what it means to strategize, why strategy is important, and what mission, vision, values, and goals are. We have to know these things before we start analyzing the external environment and before we start analyzing the internal environment. So once we created those mission, vision, and goals, then we looked at the external environment. We looked for opportunities and threats. And then we look for the internal environment. We look for strengths and weaknesses. We're looking for competencies, resources in order to create a strategic or create a competitive advantage. And now where we're focused is this thing called business level strategy. So chapter 4, we're going to look at it in chapter 6 and chapter 7. So now we're beginning to formulate of how we're going to go about our strategy as an organization to position ourselves in the industry so that we win. So now we're making decisions, which are very important decisions. And a lot of those decisions are based on the segmentation process. And so just briefly to describe what business level strategy is, it's the overall competitive theme of a business. It's a way a company positions itself in the marketplace to gain a competitive advantage. And it's a different positioning strategies that can be used in different industry settings. So just because you're in this industry setting, you can't use the same business level strategy as you would in this particular industry setting over here. Okay, so here's the slide that is the most important slide in this entire course. Because if you don't choose the right area of this slide, there's going to be massive decrease in value, and you're going to have, let's look at it this way. If you're not intentional about it, you're going to be leaking somewhere likely, or if you don't pick the right, you're going to go out of business. So if you don't understand that you should be focused on a type of market segment that is differentiated and niche, and you say you start differentiating and niche your segment, I'll just put a practical example into play because it's difficult for me to explain the theory. We talked about our organization being Reef Tropical, serving high-end homeowners in the Florida Keys. I personally got very enticed by customers who would call us and want us to come and clean their pools for $100 a month. They were small pools and they weren't really in the areas in which we would clean, but they wanted to give us a business. And I said, well, why don't we pick up this business? Because it's an additional pool account. And my father said, don't do it. It's too far away. They're not our target market. They're too price sensitive. They're just not our customer. And so I sort of ignored him in a lot of ways. And it created some friction in our company because we sent the pool tech who was getting paid $22 to $24 an hour to clean a $100 pool, $100 a month pool, where he should be cleaning $200 a month pools. And they were using a similar amount of time and resources to clean this pool as they would this other pool. And obviously it wasn't about the quoting. I'm trying to get the point of, it wasn't our target market. And we made mistakes because of that. So if I could take it all back, if I could rewind to get back into business, I would have done things a little bit differently. So that's why I'm saying, let's sit on the slide for a second and take a look at it. What does it mean? So every company is going to operate in one of these 4 quadrants. And I'll explain what these 4 quadrants mean in a second. The easiest one is this broad, low cost. So one way is the approach to the market. Are we going to choose to, say, do the shotgun approach and we're going to try to be as many things to as many people as possible, which is broad. And are we going to compete on differentiation, or are we going to compete on low cost? So this broad low cost is lots of people, low cost leadership. And the best way to look at it is Walmart. So the goal with the broad low cost business level strategy is to be a cost leader. So appeal to a wide customer base by being the lowest cost provider. How do they win? Companies like Walmart. And who can name another company that is a low cost provider? Sorry, broad low cost strategy. Shouldn't be hard. Remember the big pens? I don't know if I gave that example here. A big pen, a pen is a pen is a pen. Doesn't matter. It's 2 cents a piece. Versus Mont Blanc pens would be something different. So big pens would be a good example. Broad low cost. When Ford first started making its cars, it said that the famous quote by Henry Ford was, "I don't I don't care what the customer I don't care what color the customer I don't care what color car the customer wants as long as it's black." The joke is, I don't care what color the customer wants because I'm going to give them the color that I'm making. I have no desire to customize my product for the customer. Whereas General Motors started coming into the market fairly aggressively during that time, and they created cars of different colors, different styles, different sizes, and they started competing against Ford because Ford was too focused on we're just giving everyone a car and it's just going to be this standard car. So how do they win? High volume, low margin. Very, very important to understand. Grocery stores are in this business. They sell a lot of products and they make a little margin on each particular product that they sell. If they don't sell high volumes, they're not profitable. If they just sold, for instance, their volumes come down, they have too many fixed costs to sustain the grocery store. They need high volumes in order to win. Walmart uses economies of scale, supply chain efficiencies, and tight cost control to offer everyday low prices. So this strategy is the best in price sensitive markets. Very important to understand commodities, milk, gasoline. It's all about the cost, right? So if you can keep your cost structure in control and you can be innovative in the way in which you operate to drive your costs down, that's how you win because you're a cost leader and therefore people buy your product because it's the right price. So very powerful strategy, very hard to attain if you are coming into a new market. But once you can attain some traction as the cost leader, if you scale rapidly, then you can certainly be very, very effective within this market. Important to understand. Any questions about what it means to be a cost leader and the broad low cost strategy? Now we're going to look at what is the broad differentiation strategy. So now we're broad, so we're still shotgun. Cool. Differentiation. How can one be broad and differentiated? It's fascinating. So a lot of people, but the way in which we're serving a lot of people is we're offering multiple different kinds of products to a large amount of people. So Coca-Cola is a great example. And the story goes that Diet Coke was sort of pigeonholed or stereotyped to be a female drink. And so men were unwilling to drink Diet Coke because it made them look a kind of way. So they came up with Coke Zero specifically for men. It's really the same product. It just has a different can and it's Diet Coke in a different can essentially. But they created that. They differentiated their product offering so that they can serve it another segment, men. They wanted to attack men as opposed to women. So that would be broad. Lots of people drink Coke, but they wanted to create multiple different product offerings so that they can cater to these different segments. And then Toyota would be another example of that as well. A little bit of customization, a massive scale, but certainly able to customize according to the cars, the preferences, what people like. We went over the Toyota case, so you guys get the idea there. Fun concept to talk about. Where are you going to compete? Well, Walmart says we're going to be the cost leader, period. No ends bars, that's it. Toyota says, hey, we're going to be pretty good on cost, but we really also want to offer a multiple level of products to different segments based on their needs, desires, and wants. Walmart doesn't care. When I walk in the store and I'm like, oh, well, my juicy fruit isn't here today, and I'm really upset about that. And the person at Walmart is going to look at their watch and be like, no hablo inglés, senor. Like, I don't really care about you and your juicy fruit, so get out of my store. Whereas if you walk into Publix and you have a similar complaint, they might say, get out of my store. But the other thing that they might say too is, hey, let me check to see if another Publix down the street has one. Let me see if I can help you a little bit more. So you can see how it's starting to build a little bit more, not just around low cost, but they're also trying to bring in a level of customization as well. Powerful concept. Because if you were to move from one quadrant to the other quadrant and not be intentional about it, you're going to be very wasteful. So the goal in the broad differentiation is to serve a broad market, but differentiate based on quality, brand, or innovation. Quality, brand, or innovation are ways to differentiate yourself. Toyota competes on reliability, design, fuel efficiency, and innovation like hybrids. Coca-Cola relies on emotional branding, global reach, and consistent taste and experience. And then so the differentiated companies can charge a premium, build loyalty, and defend against price wars. So not only are they big because they're offering to a lot of people, they're also differentiated, which is a powerful concept. To master the broad differentiated category is a fun company to work for. Cool. So we're moving from this quadrant is where we started, cost leadership. And these people are still competing on cost, but they're also competing on differentiation and cost. A little bit of both. They still have economies of scale. They're still focused on a lot of people. So lots of people. But there's a few points in here that are a bit different than some of the competitors over here in the broad low-cost strategy. All right, one of my favorite markets to mess around in. Actually, this one, focus differentiation, is my favorite market to mess around in. This is not as favorite, but this is a good one too. We have Costco. This is a fun example to compare it to Walmart. You walk into Costco, and do you have a ton of alternatives to cereal selection at Costco as you would at Walmart? Do they offer 50 different kinds of cereals, or do they offer 10 different kinds of cereals? Costco compared to other companies. What is Costco doing that's a little bit more niche? And so the price per bag of Wheaties is probably lower than Walmart. Follow me here. So they're competing on price for sure. They're low cost. They're lower than Walmart. Yet they don't have nearly as many products. So they're not as broad. And really, they're only focused on like families with homes that can store these kinds of things. Like I lived in a condominium, a 2-bedroom condominium for a long time. 3 kids, husband and wife, 2-bedroom condominium. You can imagine we couldn't buy in bulk because we didn't have anywhere to put the food. We don't have a refrigerator or anything outside. So you move into a home, a single family home, you have more room. So obviously Costco is catering to people who have more living space, more storage space, and that can hold on to these items, which is much more niche, much more narrow, but they're still delivering considerably low prices. So hopefully you see the idea of Costco. And the main idea I'm trying to drive home as well, if you go to Costco, the selection of products, I think, I don't know the exact ratio, but Walmart, let's just say, is 140,000 SKUs, specific units that they're selling, 140,000 different products. Costco is more like 25,000. So they're 25,000. Again, their price per unit is lower than Walmart because you're buying in significant bulk, yet their selection is not nearly as established. So you can see a little bit of a difference. Southwest Airlines, similarly, was offering different models. It's a great example of their functional strategy because they didn't do the hub and spoke. They flew direct. Their functional strategy was also they'd fly only the same type of plane, and everyone could sit in whatever seat they wanted. So Southwest was able to create a niche market for people who enjoyed the brand of Southwest and like that style, like the way that their flight from Dallas to Miami was on time every day, and they had a great experience. They paid a lower price, but not everybody's flying from Dallas to Miami. Some people want additional options, additional ways of doing things. They like the hub and spoke model or whatever that looks like. Well, that customer's not for them. Southwest is low cost and niche, specific group of people and low cost. I don't fly Southwest. I hear great things about it, but I don't fly Southwest. And I fly a good amount, but I fly American because Miami has the hub of American here at the hub, and American goes to the destinations that I want to go to. Okay, cool. So we went through 3. We did the broad low cost, Walmart. We did the broad differentiation, Toyota and Coca-Cola. And then we did the focus low cost, which is Costco and Southwest Airlines. They know where they are. They're niched and low cost. One of the ones that is most prevalent in entrepreneurship and is most prevalent with new companies, especially some of the companies I teach, is focus differentiation. In focus differentiation, the goal is to serve a narrow customer group and offer something distinctive and high end. It's getting out of the commodity trap. If you're a cleaning company, everybody wants to be a cleaning company because they can do it. They don't need training. They don't need a license. They go there, they clean, and they make $150 an hour, and they're cleaning a house. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. But the competition is crazy. Why? Because nobody's differentiated themselves. They're just competing on price. So I'm using it just as an example of how do you differentiate yourself as a cleaning company? Well, you come in, you get some accounts, that's great, but you specialize in things like chemical removal. And then maybe you get certified to do doctor's offices. And then so now you're not just doing residential cleaning, you're doing commercial cleaning. And when you do commercial cleaning, you have waste disposal of toxic products from, again, doctor's offices or hospitals. And so then you can create a little bit more of a niche, a little bit more of a focused differentiation strategy. You can charge a premium for your cleaning services, and now you're off to the races. And you've officially differentiated yourself from your competition because of the kinds of service that you offer. So to serve a narrow customer group and offer something distinctive and high end. That's what focus differentiation is. The example is Nordstrom. Nordstrom's known for personal service, luxury brands, generous return policies. The strategy thrives on customer intimacy, perceived value, and service excellence. So when I think of Paula's company, where she delivers these, you think about these ginger shots, she's pursuing a focus differentiation strategy. So now let me ask, focus differentiation, where would Publix be? for their ginger shots. A lot of options for a lot of different ginger shot drinkers, and they have the room for it. But they're certainly not delivering it on a silver spoon the way Paula is to the house, and they're not creating a relationship with customers. They're just putting it on the shelf, whether you buy it or not. They don't care. Keep shopping. But Paula's different. She's offering a focused differentiation strategy. Again, I'm going to say this strategy thrives on customer intimacy, perceived value, and service excellence. Some would say that maybe Publix is sitting kind of straddling between these two. And we'll talk about straddling in a second. They could be sort of both of these. If you go to the meat section in Publix and you know the people who work back there and like your sliced meat, and the sliced meat costs way more than the meat that's just sitting on the shelf over there, you'll go and tell Johnny or Jenny to slice you up some meat, and you'll probably pay a premium for it because you have a relationship with them and they're nice to you and they know your name and they know what kind of meat you like. Go ahead. Good. So I'm happy that connected. So here's just a couple of other ways to visualize it. These quadrants look different, and the x-axis and the y-axis are different. But if you just take a look at it for a second, you see broad and narrow here on the x-axis, or the y-axis, and the x-axis is uniqueness, distinctiveness, and low cost. You can see narrow, which is niche, is segmentation strategy, is what they call it. So these are more focused. And then over here with the broad, you have differentiation and cost leadership. So if you can see that this differentiation and broad is what we were just talking about with Toyota and Coca-Cola, and then the cost leadership strategy is Walmart, and then everything else falls what they call segmentation strategy. This is, some textbooks, this is how they pitch it. It's a little bit less complicated. And one last visual, so you truly, this isn't, you can't see it very well because it's pixelated, but as you can see, it's a little bit different, where they have differentiation and cost leadership. Those are always there. Differentiation, cost leadership. If you're going to memorize anything from this class, you say, okay, when you go into some conversation about like, oh, we need to rebrand ourselves, or we need to recreate our structure, we need to departmentalize, whatever. You're doing some new initiative. That's a simple question when it comes to business level strategy. Okay, how about our customers? Who are we targeting? How are we segmenting the market? How are we delivering value to them? Finally answer that question. You say to yourself, okay, well, are we going to differentiate ourselves, or are we going to compete on cost? This is a fundamental question that we must answer. You think of University of Miami is pursuing a differentiation strategy when it comes to collegiate education, experience. I mean, just look at their campus. It's too much. They pay more money for landscaping there than the person does in tuition. And so, but then you come to Miami Dade, you get hopefully as good of a quality, less cost. And so, as you can see, Miami Dade is probably pursuing a more cost leadership strategy when it comes to facilitating communications, more options. I would think they'd probably be a broad differentiation, possibly. But so you get the idea. They're not strictly differentiated. And so, okay, you get the point. So that's the core of the class. I mean, if I stop there, we'd be good, but I want to make sure I continue on just a little bit so it drives the point home. What does it mean to lower cost? And why should we lower cost? Let me ask it this way. Should companies that have successfully pursued a differentiation strategy and are charging a premium, should they still attempt to lower their costs? Well, when we say lowering costs, it's really about lowering our internal costs in order to provide the service. I think that's the lowering cost concept that we're talking about here. And we don't necessarily need to decrease the price for customers, but our internal cost, the amount that it costs us to make this product or deliver the service, goes down. And what Susan said, which is an apt response, is that if you focus on lowering costs, you could potentially reduce your perception of premium, meaning you could devalue your product because you're doing something at the functional level that is creating cost savings, and then the product quality isn't going to be as good. Yet, if you can lower costs, and this is the formidable answer, and retain quality, then the answer is, of course, yes. And Apple, again, is a great example. Apple was faced in a situation where they had the option on the Apple screen of the iPhone, the screen, as we all know, when the phone first came out, it would crack, it would break, it wasn't as good, and there was all sorts of things going on with it. But they contracted at a much higher cost, a much more quality screen. It was called a Gorilla screen or something like that. So it was a very big innovation, product innovation, and it was very expensive for them. And so they chose to invest in it for quality purposes to make the most premium phone on the market, because that was their strategy. They wanted to be differentiated, they wanted to be premium. So over time, because they started making so many phones, obviously the cost of the Gorilla Glass went down and the technology got better. So essentially the cost started going down, but they did not steer away from the quality and how important the quality was. But because they attained the economies of scale and because they had such big market share, yes, their costs went down, and they just reaped the benefits of the margin of decreased cost and still being able to have such high volume. So it's a fascinating thought concept. But what does it mean? Lowering costs enables a company to gain a competitive advantage in commodity markets. Commodity is, fruits, vegetables, milk, gasoline, oil, bushels of corn, undercut rivals on price, gain market share, and maintain or increase profitability. We've talked about differentiation until we're blue in the face. So let's take a look at this chart thing for a second. And let's look at exploiting differentiation. So let's use our little clicker so we can run through this together. So, all right, we have two options. Successful differentiation, one way to do it, which is option one, is to increase prices more than cost. So we talked about this on the last class, when you increase prices, you can still get the customer to pay and you have a margin. So you can increase prices more than cost. So you just pass it along to your customer who's going to pay more money for your services, but they're loyal to you and you're differentiated. So why not? And therefore you have a higher profitability and profit growth because you pass the customer along some of these costs. Or option two is you moderate or no increase. Therefore, the demand for your product goes up because your price is still pretty good. So if your price is good, demand goes up, more people want to buy it. And then, of course, you create economies of scale and then you lower costs. This is the example that Apple used that I just mentioned. And then, of course, you attain higher profitability. So these are the two ways to exploit your differentiation in order to attain what we're trying to do when we strategize is we're trying to attain a competitive advantage, which means we're trying to create a margin, an additional profit margin as compared to our competitor. We're making 6%, our competitor's making 5% profit margin. Therefore, we have a competitive advantage. Very important. Differentiational cost trade-off, important one, because it has a lot to do with value innovation. And let's see if I can muster up enough energy to explain it. There's companies on this curve here called it's really the differentiation low cost trade-off. So if you look here, value through differentiation is, there's my clicker, my pointer, is right here. So the more value through differentiating yourself, look at Nordstrom's, we talked about that example. They're offering good value. And then this part here is low cost. So Nordstrom necessarily doesn't really have, if you can see, a cost structure that's low. The lower the cost is out here. So this is less cost. Higher cost is over here. So Walmart, as you can see, has less value through differentiation, but they have much lower cost. So this is where they're sitting. This is where Nordstrom is sitting. So Gap is the example they use as a flop, a person who is not strategizing well when it comes to these four quadrants because they haven't distinctively created, one, a differentiation strategy where they can charge a premium, or two, achieved enough scale and becoming a low-cost provider. So the reality of Gap is they're sitting here. They're not on this curve. Where Gap wants to be is here. They want to be able to deliver decent value at a decent cost. So more value than Walmart. So you shop for clothes at Walmart, you're getting clothes. You shop for clothes at Gap, you're getting better clothes. You shop for clothes at Nordstrom, you're getting the best clothes. The question remains is how much are the customers willing to pay for those clothes? And so you can see a little bit here. Far away. So, all right. So value innovation. What is value innovation? It occurs when innovations push out the efficiency frontier in an industry. So you see this where Nordstrom's, Gap Aspirations, Walmart, this is the frontier that they're on. They want to match this kind of, we're differentiated and we're charging a premium, or we're not as differentiated and we're charging less. You get it, the trade-off between low cost versus differentiation. You want to be somewhere on this curve. Now, value innovation comes into play. Whole new deal. Occurs when innovations push out the efficiency frontier in an industry, allowing for greater value to be offered through superior differentiation at a lower cost. It's like, your husband or wife is not only awesome at being a husband or wife, but they also make a ton of money, or they also cook really, really good food, and they're also like really, really good parents. Like they've knocked it out of the park. They're a leprechaun, if you would. It's like, oh my gosh, where did I find this person? This is value innovation when it comes to the equivalency of a company. They're doing things really, really, really well, differentiated. They're unique. And in addition to that, they're cheap. Not cheap. Cheap is the wrong word. They don't cost that much money. It's kind of like hopefully where Teslas will be one day where, you can get a decent Tesla for $30,000 and it's a kick butt car. So they're pushing out this frontier, and a lot of organizations should try to push out this frontier. And so it enables a company to outperform its rivals for a long period of time. Greater value to be offered through superior differentiation at lower cost. Really, really important concept for you to understand, and a fun concept for you to try to put in play in your work environment or anywhere you are as professionals. I teach leadership and management innovation. So clearly I'm super excited about this concept. And so this will be the last slide and let you guys go. All right, so we had a few examples in the last slide. But now we have these computer examples. We're looking at the computer industry. The last slide, we're looking at the clothing industry. Walmart sells clothes, Nordstrom sells clothes, and Gap sells clothes. So you saw the example there. Now we're looking at computers in the PC industry. So there's a story about a guy that was in a dorm room, and he was unreasonable, this guy. And he decided that he was going to compete in the computer industry, the PC industry. At the time, you couldn't make any money on the box, meaning the computer itself is a commodity at this point. People were like, what's the computer? It doesn't matter. It's no big deal. Everybody's making them. you just got to get one into someone's home, whatever. And you couldn't really drive down costs much more. And so you had to be in the business of software, or you weren't going to make it in the PC industry. This guy said, no, I'm going to compete on the box. I'm going to compete on the computer. And so that was a bit of a anomaly. It was a bit different. And so in addition to that, we all know the standard thing in business that when you customize something, your costs go up. When you standardize something, you offer the same shoe at, with the same parts, you only have one shoe, and you make $100,000 of the shoe, kind of like the Ford comment when he said everybody can have a car as long as it's black. That would be standardizing. If you customize something, your costs go up. It's pretty clear. So this guy decided that not only was he going to compete on the box, which was abnormal at the time, but he was also going to customize the product and charge less for the product. In addition to that, he said, I'm not going to use distributors. I'm not going to use retail. I'm going to sell it direct to the customer. I'm going to deliver my box to the customer's doorstep. So who is this unreasonable man that I'm talking about that absolutely pushed out this curve and created value innovation in the PC industry? His name is Michael Dell. And Michael Dell, if you look at Dell's market cap right now, is an $80 billion company. It's not more. And so these decisions that he made early on, which were unreasonable decisions of a college student in a dorm room, that he chose to figure out a way to do things differently in this industry, and he created value innovation. And for 10 years, nobody could compete. Dell was making the most profit margins of any computer company in the entire PC industry. And it's because of value innovation. So as you can see, Dell in 1985 was somewhere here on the efficiency curve, not ideal. They were losing to Apple, who was a little bit more of a premium price, and they differentiated themselves. Compaq was somewhere in the middle. They had somewhat of a premium price and a decent cost structure. IBM was kicking butt because they had one of the cheaper computers. They weren't as differentiated. And Dell not only moved up the curve, meaning they created more differentiation, but they also created less cost than all of these other companies. So therefore, if you remember the definition, more differentiated, less cost, they created value innovation, which expanded out this frontier and changed the entire game. So here's that chart again. We won't get into anymore, as I promised, for tonight. Hopefully you guys learned a little bit about business level strategy. Thank you for entertaining me with the content around Cirque du Soleil. Hopefully now you can see how Cirque du Soleil was differentiated. They were focus differentiated, and that you understand the concepts of these 4 different quadrants: cost leadership or differentiation. That's what I want you to remember for tonight. And then in addition to cost leadership and differentiation, is if you can focus it a little bit, you take it a little bit down to these different markets, you can segment the market a little bit. Now you're looking more towards niche, which means it's a little bit focused. So you got focus broad and you got focus differentiated. So these are just some fun terms that you can throw out there to try to impress your boss or friends when it comes to pursuing one of the first decisions we're going to make is where on this quadrant are we going to look at ourselves? Who's our customer? What do they want? How are we going to meet their needs? How are we segmenting the market? And then how are we going to position ourselves based on the low cost leadership or differentiation to deliver value to customers? Boom. Hopefully you don't dream about differentiation tonight. It's inspirational when you reflect on some of these leaders that one might consider to be heroes and think about their lives